Hello, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar on the top 7 signs your nonprofit is ready for digital transformation. We hope you take away. We're really going to tell you some things to look for in your organizations. While this is geared towards nonprofits, these things we're going to talk about are very universal. So no matter who you work for or what you see in the world, hopefully you can take some things away. My name is Andrew Harrell. I'm a director here at Forvis Mazars. I sit in our nonprofit advisory services group out of New York. And I also help run our nonprofit digital technology strategy and innovation team, just helping to find nonprofits, find those efficient ways to work, and especially in the digital technology space, finding those systems that really help them drive their mission. I'm joined today by Karina Creedon.
Thanks, Andrew. So as Andrew mentioned, I'm Karina Creedon. I'm a managing director at Forvis Mazars. I lead our national nonprofit advisory services practice, as well as our nonprofit digital technology strategy and innovation team. And as Andrew mentioned, we work with nonprofits to reimagine how they utilize both their people as well as their digital resources effectively across multiple different platforms in order to really maximize the resources at their disposal and get to the most effective way to achieve their organization's mission. I have a background in public accounting and have been working in the outsourced CFO and special project space for the last 20 or so years of my career. And along with Andrew, I'm also a CPA. So we would like to share a number of different things with you today over the course of working with clients in this space. And I think as we move forward, the first question that many of you may ask, even though we've heard this term bandied about many, many times, is exactly what is digital transformation? So in the context of today's conversation, it's really going to be around the use of technology for the accounting and finance and financial information gathering. However, it's about driving transformative change within the organization through use of cloud-based and other types of effective platforms in order to gather information in a way that is meaningful, efficient, and timely. So when we talk about digital transformation, you might think that it only has to do with the tech component. However, as Andrew is going to talk about in some detail later, and as you'll hear throughout the presentation today, it's not just about the technology, but it's also about the people that use it and the processes that they and the tasks that they do in order to use technology as a tool to move forward in the accomplishment of their daily, monthly, and annual responsibilities. So over the next hour or so, we're going to talk about not only what the 7 signs are, but what the warning signs and the alarm bells that you should be seeing and would make you pay attention a little bit more. What are some of the problems that are going to arise from these signs and why you really should care, and how digital transformation is going to improve those aspects of your organization's functionality. But ultimately, as we understand, just intuitively, why I'm sure all of you are in attendance today and why you really care about digital transformation is that in the context of your financial planning and gathering of data, having the easiest access, the most transparent access, the most timely access to information is going to allow for that growth and agility that you need to find those financial results with limited resources. Our nonprofit friends, we know that you make the most out of the least. And so being able to achieve a high degree of integrity in your financial reporting with the least impact to resources, be it cash expenditure, human capital, time, and effort, is definitely something that we can all get on board with. Digital transformation leads obviously to better accuracy and timeliness in the information that you're putting out, which ultimately leads to enhanced decision-making. And that's really the goal of the finance department, and the goal and the end product of what you're choosing to deliver in the form of your financials and other information that you're putting out on a weekly, monthly, and annual basis. So we're going to go now, as we flip the page here, we're going to do a polling question at the beginning, and we're going to level set a little bit and try and understand our audience and see where you're coming from. So Andrew and studio, why don't we look forward to the next page? Thanks, and then Karina. We can, and then Andrew will jump right in. Thanks.
So just to level set, and as we give examples, we just want to know kind of where you're coming from. Easiest question, I'd assume most people, you're coming to a CPE from an accounting firm, you're on the finance and accounting side. Just what accounting system are you using right now? We've listed some of the major players in the nonprofit space. Also, if your system's not listed there, we love learning what's out there. So if you put other, more than happy if you can put it in the Q&A box of what you're using. Like I said, our team is out there trying to see what's in the world. So we just want to find out what's out there and really kind of figuring out, as we move into digital transformation, what are those keys to success? Before we get into this smoke alarm and these warning signs, really what is the key to success? And it really comes down to how your organization is going to go about change. What are those change management? How are you working through the speed bumps? Because any type of digital transformation, really, it's never going to be linear. There's always going to be bumps in the road. There's always something that's going to go wrong. It's never going to be the smoothest process, but having it planned out correctly really allows nonprofits especially to get those financials they want. And just looking at this, it seems like we have a lot of we have some QuickBooks. It's really gamut across the board. And that's what we're seeing in the industry right now, is just there are so many options out there, but just figuring out how to do it right and figuring out how to go about that change management. Have you scoped correctly? Have you done your due diligence with vendors? Making sure your people understand the systems. We see a lot of nonprofits, they have all the bells and whistles. Their people don't know how to use it. And as Karina said, there's so many things that go into digital transformation that aren't technology related. And we do a lot of work in this space with nonprofits and determining, are your problems people, process, or systems? Because most of the time it can come down to one of those three and figuring out how to do it. And that change management in the middle, making sure you have that commitment for the board. And just a little preview, if you want to learn more about change management and project management as it comes to nonprofit digital transformation, we'll be doing a webinar on that in October. So just a little preview, and that invitation will go out soon. But just, it's a big endeavor, especially for nonprofits. We preach on this so much. Your money is limited when you invest in your admin and your infrastructure. It means it's going away from the program. So making sure those dollars are housed correctly, making sure that whatever you take away from the program to put into your admin ends up furthering your mission at the end of the day, and those investments make sense. That planning at the front is so important. And that's why we wanted to kind of have this slide, just to kind of prep you that this is a big undertaking. We understand that. And before we went into all these things to look for and think about how to make your organization better, being able to stop and sit back and go on, what is my project charter? What are the goals of this project? And make sure you keep your eyes on the prize, just because it is a huge undertaking. And we want to make sure if nonprofits, like I said, if we're taking money away from that mission, that it's going to something useful and it's going to allow the organization to grow and thrive. Anything you would add there before we go into the 7 things, Karina?
I think that, as you notice here, I think Andrew said the word change management probably 4 times already, 5 times already. And we're going to be hitting on that theme throughout the course of the next hour, because this is not just about putting a shiny new piece of hardware or software or SaaS-based platform in at your organization and hoping that it's going to cure all ills. It's about a total organizational change. And that change management is about communication, it's about planning, it's about continued insight into the milestones that need to be reached throughout the course of this project that you're undertaking. And so being able to plan intentionally on the front end and then see it through and communicate throughout is what we've seen, the most successful digital transformation strategies have had a very intentional change. Thanks, Andrew. So jumping right over to our 7 signs.
At a really high level, we just more wanted to, there are so many things that can be warning signs. We just we took a look at the clients we've had and the ones we are proposing on, and we talked to a lot of nonprofits. These are 7 things that we see that keep reoccurring as general themes. If we look at our big digital transformation projects, these are things that I'd say 5 of the 7 show up in every one of them. And some of them can be things that you don't even realize. Sometimes you're just so in the weeds, and we'll hit on some of them. But even the extensive use of Excel, I don't want to steal Karina's thunder, but it's one of those things, until you take a step back and realize what the possibilities are, you don't realize that this is a sign that things aren't working. So these are not the only 7 signs. These are just 7 that we wanted to hit on. Obviously, there are so many more. And I will turn it over to Karina for the first sign.
Thank you. So I think that, as Andrew mentioned, that extensive use of Excel. Listen, most of us sitting on this call today are accountants, and we accountants love Excel. It is streamlined, it's organized, it fits our desire to put things in boxes and add up numbers and use our pivot tables and be able to compile and corral those pieces of data in a way that is systematic and user-friendly. However, ultimately, for more complex and large-scale financial operations, Excel is not the tool that can be used. And it does not, there are limitations like any tool. There are limitations that make it not only inefficient, but can render really poor results. And so when we're thinking about what are some of these warning signs or triggers or alarm bells that are going off, in that leftmost column, doing allocations in Excel. Andrew and I were talking to a client not too long ago with respect to their payroll allocations. And we were working on an HRIS, an HR implementation project. And they found that in the course of their, biweekly payroll, they were doing payroll allocations between their payroll provider and what they ultimately had to get into their general ledger. It was taking them through Excel. It was taking them hours and hours and hours and hours. And sometimes based on the size and complexity of the organization and the multiple entities that it had, it could even occasionally take more than a day. They started in Excel. It was good at the time. They have outgrown that, right? Performing the monthly close in Excel. That is not an efficient way of mechanizing this process for intercompanies. It is not an efficient way for data keeping across multiple entities. There is not, when you have multiple departments, multiple subsidiaries, that consolidation process requires merging data from multiple different Excel files, right? And that's going to, again, increase that risk of discrepancies, of errors, and delays in ultimately producing the financial results that we're all waiting for. Pulling reports out of GL and manipulating them in Excel to get what you need. At the end of the day, any information that you can create or pull and use natively within your general ledger system should be kept there. Having to take data out of your general ledger system or any of the subsidiary ledgers, any of the ancillary systems, and we'll talk about that as well, like your AP, or if you have a CRM, a donor database, donor management database, et cetera, billing software, taking that information out, adding another layer of complexity, another step in the process is going to increase the opportunity for errors in process, errors and delays, decreases in integrity of that information. You are limiting the source of truth, the one book of truth, which we'll talk about in a minute. And obviously there's an inefficiency with respect to time. Manually creating those custom reports, think about it, as an example, we were actually just talking about this the other day. your department heads, they have different needs, right? They look at information differently from how accounting may, both from a programmatic perspective, as well as, famously, we know that our fundraising and development friends look at information and dollars differently from how the accounting folks do. Your development people come to you and ask you to send them a report each month based on a breakout of earned revenue, right? And they want to see something broken out between what comes in from the cafe and their ticket sales, and the ticket sales that they get at the door versus what they get online and what they get in their little gift shop. But that's not how the cash is received, and that's not how it comes in from Stripe, and that's not how it's imported into the general ledger. And so you end up creating these reports, which they do need that information for, but the way in which you need to tailor it and pull that information really is a excessive manipulation, and it becomes a tortured exercise that ultimately does not give you the warm and fuzzies, because not only is the information potentially subject to being wrong for one reason or another, just as simple as slipping a digit, but it takes a tremendous amount of time to create, right? And so these warning signs that you're seeing are, again, bringing us to why it's a problem. It's time consuming, as we just talked about. You don't have that real-time data. Excel does not update immediately. It does not have that integration. It's limited in terms of scale. There's only so much that you can pull and feed from your general ledger, or from these ancillary databases, or from your credit card transactions that you're getting, that you're uploading from your website and pulling them in. There's only a limited amount of information that you can get to before the volume is just too great, right? For our auditors who are sitting on the call, or for our internal accounting people who are responsible to answer to the auditors when it comes year end and PBC preparation time, there are inadequate audit trails that are not created by using Excel. There is not adequate sign off. There's not version control. There's not updates. All of this leads to issues when it comes time to documentation. At the end of the day, ultimately, when you do not have the information that you need to move forward, then you can't tell if your mission objectives are being met, because without measurable data to be able to prove that you have achieved certain outcomes, you cannot tell if your fundraising data, if you're programming, if your fundraising data, if you're programming monies, if your expenditures are indeed going and being spent in the best way. And if you can't make informed decisions because it's taking you too long to get that information to their stakeholders because of all these problems we just talked about, clearly that's a sign of a problem, right? So how does digital transformation help? Certainly integrating with other systems more seamlessly, as you have a system that is designed to integrate with either open source API or other types of integration methodology. And just so you know, one of Andrew's favorite phrases, Andrew, would you like to talk about it now with respect to the download and upload? One of his favorite phrases.
We sit on so many demos that we hear the word integrate so many times, and it's part of one of the things we hound is a download, import, export is not an integration. And when we're talking in the digital space and thinking about the extensive usage of Excel, anytime Excel is involved, it is not an integration.
Correct.
It is a manual workaround because the company hasn't developed an integration. So it's one of the things we watch for, and it's a reason I don't have hair.
So how digital transformation can help. It can create those custom reports that your development team needs. It can have them auto run each period, each quarter. But auto run is different from auto send. This is not a set it and forget it. You never want to have a report that's created every month and blast out to all of your stakeholders. There still needs to be the human element. And we're going to talk about that as well, because digital transformation does not mean removing the human. It means elevating the human to better, more intelligent tasks once you take the mundane out of it. It allows for more robust audit trails. It allows you to have better financial planning tools. It allows you to have better reporting and better scenario planning as you go forward, to make sure that you're meeting your objectives, that you're meeting your budgets, that you're meeting your cash planning needs. And so again, all of these, while Excel is fantastic in a number of ways, in the modern digital age, it is a relic from the past that should be limited to certain less complex circumstances. And there are much better tools out there. So with that, we're going to go to sign number 2, and I'm going to turn it over to Andrew.
Yeah, so sign number 2, when we asked for some of the accounting systems, we saw it. The use of internally hosted software. The 2 I know I saw in the chat and in the polling questions, the big one, obviously, that's the legacy system is QuickBooks Desktop. That is housed on somebody's computer or server. And then the other one we see a lot is Microsoft Great Plains, which I know people are moving to Business Central and Dynamics to be hosted. But those are internally hosted. They're not necessarily in the cloud. And what that brings is kind of multiple things. Usually someone on the IT staff has to maintain that and upkeep that. That means if there's an update from the company, that has to be pushed through. When I think of that, I think of back in the days where you got the giant pile of zip disks, and you'd have to shove them in and hope it updated and hope your files converted. That's kind of what's happening still in 2024 with some of these internally hosted software. And the other thing is you need an IT staff who knows what's going on. Your IT staff has to be involved. What we see in some of these cloud-based softwares is, I actually just got done an implementation where the IT guy sat on the implementation for the entire implementation. We got to the end going, I had nothing to do here because it's hosted. We don't need IT to be an admin. There's nothing on the back end for IT to customize. It's all tailorable, not customized. And it's a lot more streamlined and allows the IT people to turn their focus to helping the program, developing custom apps for people in the field. This was the Health and Human Services organization. They were able to revamp their intake form to make it much more streamlined to get people into the program quicker. And that was all because we selected a cloud-based accounting software. They were able to treat more people in the field. Doesn't seem like it would have a connection, but there is a connection there. And some other reasons it's a problem. You have security issues. If it's hosted on your server and your server gets hacked or wiped or somebody knocks out the plug to the server room or turns off the air conditioning, you lose everything. And it's not necessarily backed up. That's a separate process your IT team will have to set up to back up your system. A lot of these cloud-hosted systems, they back up nightly. They're also usually bigger platforms that have a SOC 1, SOC 2 report. They have a robust testing of their internal controls and their backup procedures that if something goes wrong, it's on a company. And usually as part of these contracts, there are financial reimbursements if it's down for a certain amount of time, that your company is protected with backups and security and insurance needs. The other thing is, the other big piece that I would take away here, some of these internally hosted software, while you can have integrations, it's a lot harder and there are a lot less options. With most of these cloud softwares, they have an open API. Your Blackbauts of the world, your Sage, your NetSuite, it has an open API. There are endless possibilities of what you can hook in. And almost all of these have a marketplace where you can choose between, you want AP automation, there are 50 softwares that out of the box connect to these accounting systems. Not so for these database versions and these hosted versions. There may be 1 or 2 through a complex integration that needs to be updated once a month, or you have to click a button to resync it. They're not automatic, and it just lowers your choice, and it lowers that ability to scale. You're not able to get the latest and greatest. And one of the other things that we love about cloud software is that updating. It's automatic. It's not a matter of hoping your file or getting I get them from the firm when they update our internal software, our systems are down for a night. With cloud software, those updates are automatic. They have been tested. Now we see what happens when they go wrong with the CrowdStrike outage a few weeks ago, but that wasn't on an internal nonprofit team to update and hope that our file still works. It's updated, you get the newest features right away, you're a part of those product rollouts, and it just allows for that scalability, that automation quicker. How can it help? I've hit on most of these. It also allows for that. We're seeing a lot more hybrid remote work. If you're on a server-based version of a software, you either have to log in through a Citrix, a Windows desktop, or you just can't connect when you're out of the office. We still see that there are softwares our clients are using that if they are not sitting at their desktop in the office, they can't do anything. And where that hurts is some of these nonprofits, some of the programs don't have 9-to-5 jobs because they are helping people. They are out in the community. And we have clients that are in affordable housing. If a pipe bursts and they call their plumber and the plumber goes, "You still haven't paid me for the last 6 bills," and the accounting team can't access the AP software outside of the office Saturday at 9 when the plumber's saying, "I'm not showing up and your basement is leaking," that's a problem. And then you usually have to pay the plumber, who's not your friend, about 4 times the rate to clean up your basement. So there are concrete effects of the program to these internally hosted software. And that's why we see that as a warning sign, especially with so much in the cloud, so much flexibility with some of these softwares. Just let's move on. Let's get to something that can allow us to really work as we should. That brings us to number 3.
Thanks, Andrew. So board reporting inconsistencies. Your board of directors, your advisory board, if you are at a faith-based organization, it might be a board of elders, however it may be. These individuals are tasked with a responsibility that is fiduciary, and they have their job is to provide oversight and guidance to the organization to make sure that it sticks to its mission, that it is spending its funds wisely, that there's a good stewardship to the financial and other resources that it has, and that the outcomes and mission goals that were laid out are being achieved. And without having access to information that's reliable and timely, you are compromising the ability of the board to help you and advise you and guide you. And so when you think about some of these warning signs, which aren't necessarily listed here, but they're fairly intuitive, right? That delayed or inaccurate reporting. You have perhaps advisory meetings or board meetings every quarter, or every 4 months, however it may be, 3 months. But if you're finding that you are constantly rushing to put together that board deck, that the information is inconsistent from period to period, that 1 month you're comparing quarter to date, but then the next period you're comparing budget to actual on a month to date, and there's not a real comparative ability to be able to show a consistency in that comparison, that the tables are not comparative, that there aren't metrics there that can be followed and tracked, that your finance team seems flustered when they are presenting the information. They don't seem confident in the information that they're preparing because that they're presenting to you, in these board reports. If perhaps you're finding that the same questions are being asked by your board members each quarter or each meeting, or the same types of metrics they're asking for, but yet they're not being given them, meeting after meeting after meeting, because the system is not able to produce that information, or perhaps there's non-financial data that they're looking for. It might be with respect to, DSP, direct service personnel. Maybe it's about, expenses that are personnel related versus, other than personnel related, or it may be more mission specific as opposed to financial based. And if there are metrics and information they're looking for that they're not getting, these are all indicators and triggers that, your board is not getting the information it needs to be able to help you. We're going to talk a little bit more about, audit responsibility. When it comes time to present to your board the results of your audit, and they find out that the year-end audit results vary widely from the results that you've been presenting quarter over quarter, or even your unaudited 12-month numbers that you presented to them several months ago, because perhaps there were lots of year-end adjustments or auditor proposed adjustments. Again, these are all warning signs. So why is that a problem? Again, the data isn't consistent. The decisions are being made off of inaccurate data. this provides for real difficulty in monitoring the performance of the organization. Board members have day jobs, they have other obligations and responsibilities, and they're relying on this consistent and accurate financial reporting in order to monitor your performance, the organization's performance, against not only its goals and objectives and budgets, but also against best practices, against their knowledge of what similarly sized or positioned organizations in, that particular philanthropic sub-niche do. And inconsistencies make it really difficult to track that progress and to hold management accountable and to make sure that we are identifying those areas that need improvement. When we do have inaccurate financial information, that's giving your board misleading financial information, which then is leading to poor decision making. And they may be making strategic decisions based on underlyingly flawed data. And that could result in missed opportunities, misallocation of resources, misallocation of time, or worse, right? Thinking about that mission focus and that strategic alignment of our resources to our programmatic outcomes. If we don't understand where our dollars are being spent and on what, and what the outcome that we are achieving is, we are not providing the board the ability to tie together the strategic objectives that they have for the mission with the financial reality of the organization. It makes your staff, it makes your finance team look unprofessional, disorganized. It erodes confidence in your team by the board. And all of that is clearly hindering to a good, strong, trustworthy relationship, working relationship, collegial relationship with your board. So how is digital transformation going to help? Well, at a minimum, talking about that customized reporting for board meetings, they're asking about certain metrics. They're asking for information to be presented in a certain way. Maybe one of your board members has, the way in which she's always seen this prepared at a certain other nonprofit that she's worked with, and it's really been helpful for you. You can create those customizable reporting tools in your new system, and that will help you, in a much quicker time, with a much greater degree of accuracy, tailor the specific needs of these different stakeholders, right? And that will allow for this creation of these customized reports that is going to give consistent information across multiple periods, multiple formats, and it's going to reduce that risk of inconsistency and error. The information is going to be up to date. It's going to be timely. We're talking about that central point of truth. We've mentioned that a couple of times. The single source of truth. That single source of truth, sometimes people refer to it as the Bible, right? Digital transformation often involves implementing what we call an integrated system environment, that integrated financial management system where all of your data is centralized, either and housed in one system or maybe in multiple systems, but that are indeed speaking with each other and integrated, and as Andrew was mentioning, with those API integrations. This assures that all of the reports that are being generated are actually coming from the same information that's updated at the same time, that's accurate, and it's the same data set. And therefore, you're eliminating that inconsistency from one report to another. That is going to equip your board to be able to address for you issues of risk management. They're going to be able to address issues of adequate funding. They're going to be able to support you and give you a mandate for other types of funding that you want if you can prove and you can show trending and you can show need and you can show a return on investment, to use a for-profit term, of how dollars spent are translating into strategic initiatives and success, right? And again, by pulling from your donor database, by being able to pull from non-financial information, by being able to pull from various pieces of information across multiple data points, you're able to pull together pieces of information into a full financial picture that truly tell a story of the organization that now your board can translate and can help you move forward. This is really what's called that mission-driven financial planning, and that's what you want out of your board. So with that, we are going to actually turn to our next polling question. Andrew, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Perfect. So as we're talking about boards, how often does your board or finance committee meet? And this is something we like to know what organizations are doing. We saw during COVID, sometimes they met more, and now they're becoming a little more relaxed. As we're getting there, I think I have a prime example from my days in industry about that board reporting is we had our CRM and we had our accounting system and the donor database. They didn't talk, but it was always reconciled. Like I would have my reports, everything would get reconciled. But then come board time, because they were pulling from Salesforce and I was pulling from our accounting system, our numbers would never match. Now I could reconcile back and forth, they just never matched because the databases weren't integrated, so the numbers weren't exactly the same. We had different definitions. And it wasn't until about a year and a half in, I bought development lunch and I sat down and said, we're going to define all these terms. What is a commitment? When are you recording revenue? What is hitting your books? Are you presenting cash or accrual? Because the first few times I got asked, I just said, oh, they're on a cash basis. My former CFO is long since retired, so I can say that now. I would just say they're on a cash basis. That's why we're different. But really sitting down, and it's part of that digital transformation, is when you connect these databases, making sure that we're all speaking the same language. And it goes back to digital transformation isn't just a system. It's that people, process, and system to make sure everything's running smoothly. So it looks like, and we see this a lot of these finance committees or boards are meeting quarterly. And I think with some of these systems and processes, just because they're meeting quarterly doesn't mean they can't get that reporting monthly. And just giving them a heads up, it sometimes makes some things a little easier. So that kind of brings us to number 4 of the 7 signs. Vendor management problems, and I kind of touched on that earlier when we were talking about the plumber and the flooding. We have a lot of clients, and it happens to us when we send out bills. We are in client service. We send out bills and we follow up on them and go, oh, it got lost in our process. Let me figure out where it is, because a lot of nonprofits, it's still that paper, and this is where we talk a lot about, once COVID happened, a lot of these nonprofits went to what we call Frankenstein processes. We had about, and I know I was in industry at the time, we had about 2 weeks maybe to figure out how to issue payments because we didn't have a checkbook sitting in the office anymore because no one was in the office. And a lot of these nonprofits, they went to their bank, how can we do this quickly? And now we're 3-4 years later and we're still using that quick process that might not be efficient. It requires us to go in and enter all our vendors' information every time we want to make a payment. That's not safe. Our vendor information just might not be protected. But also, how are invoices coming in? Do they come into an inbox that we're hoping somebody sees it and grabs it and enters it into the accounting system? Does it get printed out and inter-office mailed to the person who has to sign it? And really that lack of visibility. If I am out in the field, out performing a program in health and human services, I'm serving patients, and I am coordinating with vendors to make sure that I have my supplies, I have the programs, I have the internet on in the building I'm in. If I don't have visibility that my vendors got paid and I have to call up finance because the lights aren't going on, that's just a breakdown of communications, because not only does that make your people in the field angry, because like, why can't finance do their job? The people in accounting and finance are now being bogged down and not being able to produce those board reports because I have to go into my system and see, did Karina get paid, or is that why the internet got shut off? That vendor getting paid on time, unless there are reasons, trying to avoid late fees. I know we started tracking late fees when I was in industry just to see what's not getting paid, and it turned out it was all our cable bills, because what happened was cable and internet bills. What would happen was they were mailed to our branches and then they would just sit there on somebody's desk. Once we turned everything on paperless and it went to a shared inbox, we didn't have any more late fees. But that was also part of our digital transformation to set our processes up to track these types of things. We stopped recording it in our general ledger as part of our internet bill, and we started tracking late fees separately. That way we could see the account balloon and then investigate it. So it comes back to, that wasn't a new system, it was a change in process. Going back to how digital transformation can help, especially in the vendor realm. The AP automation that's out there, we see so many software, so many different things. The possibilities are endless. There are services that invoice comes into your inbox, it gets picked up by AI, it gets coded for the first pass, it then gets reviewed by somebody at the AP automation company, and then it comes to your AP clerk for review. And what that really does, it allows your AP person, rather than being that data entry person, to be that review person. And one of Karina's favorite phrases is putting people to their highest and best use. There is no one at these nonprofits, even the people that have been there for 20, 30 years doing the same thing, no one's highest and best use is data entry. And if we can get away and have these people actually analyzing the bills, realizing, hey, we're paying sales tax on this. We're a nonprofit. Why are we doing that? If you have to enter 60, 70 bills a day, you're never going to have time to see those types of things. And there are savings that can come just by having people being allowed to analyze things. The other reason some of these vendor management systems are so good and how digital transformation can help is some of these now have vendor onboarding. The vendor is the one entering their payment information. That takes away risk from your organization, whether it's a phishing scam, whether it's your employees, whether it's fraud on your own employees. If the vendors are the ones controlling their payments and their payment information, it takes risk away from the organization and also just frees up time. And then obviously the other biggest one is it internalizes your approval flows. If I'm paying through an AP automation vendor, I can't have somebody just pick up my checkbook and forge a signature, or I can't have my CEO just randomly sending out checks. There are processes in the system that can't be bypassed. And that just helps organizations track money better and manage cash flow. So just many ways that digital transformation can help, especially in that vendor management. And that kind of brings us to number 5, a prolonged close, any accountant's nightmare.
There you go. Thanks, Andrew. So what does it look like? What are the warning signs? You know, everyone's ideal is to start their close. You've heard the concept of the continuous close, right? To start your close immediately upon the end of the month, or even better, be doing tasks during the month such that by the time that the end of the month comes, you're able to jump right into that close process. Instead, you find that you and your team are working on the 15th, the 18th, the 20th, the 27th workday of the month, and you still haven't finished your close process, right? You have people beating down your door who are looking for their precedent information from you so that they can create their own reporting, either for their boards or for their departments or for their budget to actuals. It also feels like by the time that one close process finishes, it's time for the next month. And so your people are burnt out, they are stressed, they are working fast and furious, and they are working really hard. They might not be working smart, right? That leads to increased opportunity for errors, increased vulnerability for controls to be overlooked. And it also is not an environment, it doesn't have an environment that is going to encourage innovation, because there simply isn't time to stop and think about how can we do things better. We've mentioned a number of times that digital transformation isn't all about the tech, it's about the process, it's about the people. Your people don't have time to reimagine their processes and doing them in a more intelligent fashion if they are constantly running up against the wire in order to close the books, right? Manual processes, lack of communication during the close, not only between members of their own team, but interdepartmentally. All of these things are warning signs. So why is this a problem? You know, we've talked about it a number of times, obviously, not to repeat so many of them again and again, but I think one of the ones that the two that I'd really like to hit on the most, frankly, is thinking about not having a streamlined workflow and work processes and close checklist. By not having that plan, that work plan for your close, you are creating a vacuum where there is not a consistency. You are not able to catch errors. You are not able to plan out and executive manage an executive, from an executive functioning perspective, plan out your close and look at those dependencies about what needs to come from what department, from what person, and in what order, at what time, in order to be able to streamline things a little bit better. And without having that process, and therefore the data that comes out of these integrated systems, you're doing yourself, your people, your financials a great disservice. But the second piece that I wanted to hit on, and why this is a problem, and we've talked about it in a number of circumspect ways, is the human element, right? And ultimately, as Andrew mentioned, one of my favorite phrases is enabling people to work to their highest and best potential, right? Their highest and best use. The job market over the last 4 years has been extremely chaotic, to say the least. And the workforce is demanding and deserves a higher degree of job satisfaction. Our nonprofit personnel, particularly those who are working outside of the programmatic service component and those working in back office functionality, sometimes feel disconnected from the mission and from their contribution to the mission, but they are there because of the love of the philanthropic goals of the organization, right? They may be there, probably there for less money than their counterparts in for-profit business. And so you want to make sure that they're at least feeling a job satisfaction that is not tied to repetitive, routine, brain-numbing work that could be better off done by an automated system, right? And when you are trying to bring in new staff, younger staff, different generation, upskilled generation of workers, they are going to look to see, are we still doing things in Excel and on 16-column green sheet paper? This is where I date myself. Or are we using, the most, maybe not the most, but a better, newer generation of technology in order to make better use of the resources that we have? It doesn't promote a collaborative environment when we are not using our resources to the best and highest use. There's a lack of cross-training. There's vulnerability for job succession and business continuity if someone should leave. There's lack of internal controls. All of these are problematic. So what can digital transformation do? We've talked about it, and not to repeat again all of the, the details about manual errors and improved reporting, but I think the two biggest things I'd like you to come away with here with respect to the close is that digital transformation can help in flexibility of your close process, because you're going to have that increased transparency, you're going to have the automated workflows and the job satisfaction, but you're also going to be able to scale up and to pivot to the current realities of your organization, of their programmatic needs, of your future strategic mission, of the goals that you are trying to plan for. You can adapt to the changes in the market, in your donor database, in your expenses. And then, as we talked about with respect to the human element, we can move our people from doers to reviewers. We can move them from executors to evaluators. And that is the best use and the highest use of our human capital when we move the minutia to the machines and we move the thinking to our humans. So with that, Andrew, let's go over to sign number 6.
Sign number 6. So it's lack of automated internal controls. And I think this hits on all of the 7, but we wanted to make sure we call it out. Having things systemized allows you to you have to maintain with it. I was talking about it when we were talking about vendor management. If you have a systematized payment method, you can't really just bypass it. There's no way to do that. Some of these systems just don't have those, what I've heard in the industry called God rights, where you can just do whatever you want in the system. They have internal controls. They are designed not to be bypassed. And really having that, it allows it. I mean, going back to that prolonged close, if you have an automated close system, you can tell where you are, make sure sign-offs. I know when I was in industry, we had that Excel sheet. And I will be honest, we had a 6-day close. That Excel sheet was only updated when I had meetings with my boss to tell him where we were. It wasn't updated. Like there were internal controls, but it's just like the sign-offs on that sheet, they weren't real. It was just a matter of to be able to update of my boss of where it was. But we had the internal controls in our accounting systems that every journal entry had to be reviewed. I reviewed everything, and if I put something in, my boss had to review it. That way, nothing hit the GL without that control. Come audit time, it was an easy thing to pass. And just having these automated workflows, really with those built-in controls, it takes away some of the risks. It takes away some of the thinking. And like Karina said, when things get busy and there's so much going on, and where you could have a slip up of controls, hey, we're at the end of the month, our board meeting's tomorrow, we got to get this entry in, just put it in. If you don't have those approvals set up in the system, somebody could just go in and make that entry. So really having those controls that can help. And that'll bring us to one of our last polling questions. Do your systems integrate with each other? Yes, but it requires that import-export, which isn't an integration, or no, our systems really don't talk and we get those multiple databases. And really it's just getting at kind of what environment are you working with it right now. And as we are waiting for that, I will talk about our seventh sign, which is really that data redundancy across systems. And I was talking about it when I was talking about development versus finance, which is the internal struggle at any nonprofit. And it's really, how does your data move across the systems? Because if your systems aren't integrated, if your systems aren't connected, you're either doing double entry or your data is not the same. And really what we try to create for our clients in these integrated system environments, maybe your accounting system isn't the source of truth. It's a source of truth, but maybe that's not the entry point. Maybe when we're dealing with donors, our AP system is our entry point. And we're dealing with vendors. When we're dealing with donors, it's our CRM. That's our data entry point. And if we're in health and human services, our ERM is going to be that revenue. That's going to be that entry point. And really figuring out having that single entry point for data is really important, because then you're not duplicating work. You're not spending the time to enter the same information. Anytime you have to enter information again, you're creating a space that an error can happen. It's the same reason that even though I love Excel, I hate Excel, because anytime you put something into Excel, you are increasing the probability that there's going to be an error. We've all had that Excel document where the gremlin crawled inside and broke all our formulas, or Excel failed and you lost hours worth of work. I've cried at my computer. I'm sure most of us have. If you have connected systems, you're not doing that. Data flows between the two, but that means you need to have those good processes. Karina mentioned it before, not to have set it and forget it. Making sure that you have set things up to work and that you're reviewing it, that the data does not flow without review, but that the data flows, that we're reviewing what goes into our CRM for the accounting processes, for the coding, for the actual commitments. But then it ends up in our accounting ledger. And I don't have to do that monthly reconciliation of taking my GL versus what my development has put into a virtuous, and seeing what works there, and really creating that environment where systems talk to each other to get that data in one place. So that is our 7 signs. And I'll turn it over to Karina to just talk about one more time about, you've heard all the reasons digital transformation can help, and this just kind of helps sum it up.
Thanks, Andrew. So, we've hit on it a number of times. I think that looking at digital transformation is a huge expense. It's an expense in dollars, in time, in resources, and human capital. But it ultimately is an investment in your organization and will bring you better return on your financial results. It will bring you a greater job satisfaction for your employees and ability to hire and retain the best staff that are out there, better insights into your organization's performance and how you're achieving your mission's goals. And it really will give you the opportunity to grow and scale and reach more people in your community and more organizations and more individuals across, across many different types of, opportunities, when you have that ease of access to information that will drive those decisions. And so the sole point of this presentation is to really encourage you to think about how using and seeing digital transformation as a tool will enable you to really reach your mission goals that much more quickly by using your financial information in a much more meaningful way. So hopefully this was helpful. Certainly, if you'd like to speak with either of us, we would be glad to speak to you a little bit more. Thank you for joining us.